Welcome. You are listening to the Fallen Earth podcast with Bennett. That's me. The only podcast I know of about Fallen Earth since every other podcast got nuked off the face of the planet or infected with the Shiva virus when global tech ruined the world. I'm your host, Bennett, and we will be talking about all things Fallen Earth, the divergent community it was. It's 5:45 a.m. In New Orleans, Louisiana, and this is my first cup of coffee, and it is showing at the line unable to communicate in full sentences. So, the divergent community it was, became, and now remains a phantom shadow of its former self. We will talk about all things related to Fallen Earth, including things that are not specifically Fallen Earth related, such as large gaming communities that saw the huge potential of the game and invested hard, heavy, and early in this antiquated gem of an MMO. Since this is our first episode, let us set the stage and scenario of the Grand Canyon province where Fallen Earth takes place and give the logline introduction. Well, we did that in the first episode. I need to delete that from my show notes. All right. Speaking of show notes, get this out of the way real quick. If you type in exile.chat in your browser, it should take you to the Discord here. If you go to exile.fyi, there will be the podcast episodes. You can also find them on Spotify, and I am currently setting up all of the other avenues for the podcast to be hosted at. So let's just jump right back into the Bainbridge document, shall we? Oh, yes. Nightmare intellectuals. Stuff of nightmares. Fallen Earth, a remarkable post-apocalyptic MMO. He says remarkable. You know, I'd say it is remarkable. Like, it's worth remark. Is often compared with Fallout 3, the solo player game we considered in chapters 1 and 5, and bears comparison with Zyson. I gotta look into this game, Zyson. Explored in chapter 2. So, end of the sentence there. By the year 2156, global civilization had fallen. And in an area perhaps 1,000 square miles around the Grand Canyon. I need to move this. My neck is not going to like me. Okay. In an area perhaps 1,000 square miles around the Grand Canyon in the American Southwest, small groups seek to live off the land as mutant animals and enraged humans attack from all sides. Other than the rules coded into the game program, laws prevail only within tiny areas controlled by a single faction. The groups all need to deal with the fact that civilization has fallen, developing idiosyncratic theories about why it happened, and radical plans for what to do about it. This MMO expressed the fundamental theory behind the majority of them. Humans are doomed to battle each other to the death. The only question is which other humans will become allies and which enemies. Mr. Bainbridge goes on to say, when the barbarian invader Alaric conquered Rome in the year 410, the shock jolted the entire classical world because the eternal city no longer seemed eternal, yet it held the Mediterranean together. St. Augustine reacted to this trauma by writing The City of God, which imagined that transcendent stability somehow existed on a spiritual plane far above the actual Italian peninsula. Quotations. This is some Greek. Incomparabiliter superna est sia tuus clarior ubi victoria uri God damn it, urietas ubi dignitas sanctitas ubi fax felicitas ubi vita aeternas. So the English version is, the heavenly city is far above thine, where truth is the victory, holiness the dignity, happiness the peace, and eternity the continuance. The fall of Rome loomed large over the Dark Ages and defined the Renaissance not as objective progress, but as restoration from a degraded condition. Yet, in the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, Edward Gibbon wondered why Rome took so long to fall, given its social pathologies. And we may as well wonder whether our own civilization has become equally corrupt and perhaps more fragile because of the destructive power of the technologies developed since the days of the Caesars. Amongst the greatest works of American art from the 1830s is a sequence of 5 romantic paintings by Thomas Cole. The course of empire, showing the same Rome-like location as civilization rises and falls. Yet the most intense and intellectually rich explorations of this profound issue came from the period a century later, when many intellectuals believed the end was nigh, in the period between the two world wars. War. Jacob Marino, encountered in chapter 1, was only one of many intellectuals who were gripped by fascination with the potential end of modern civilization. Today, sadly, social network researchers fail to see the intense merit of one of the most important work in their tradition. His bizarrely titled book, Who Shall Survive, dating from 1934, still valuable today as a collection of demonstration studies or even a textbook. It included sociograms, statistical studies such as one of the social relations of 505 girls living in a reformatory, and a catalog of theoretical concepts on which he based the new science of social networks he called sociometry. When I summarized this pioneer book in 1997, I ended thus. Marino believed that sociometry provided the information necessary to reorganize groups to the benefit of all members. Social isolates could be brought into contact with people who would become their friends. Those individuals with hostile relations toward each other could be separated. When a new community is being planned, individuals who want to live in it could be given a population test to determine their sociological suitability. Migration from one town to another could be guided rather than haphazard to create healthy communities. Publishing in the very year when Hitler gained control over Germany, Marino believed that sociometry could be used to understand relations between Germans and Jews and perhaps create more favorable bonds between German Jews and the society surrounding them. Marino's dream that his techniques could cure society of its pathologies never became reality, but sociometry has become an essential tool of sociological research. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting, Mr. Bainbridge. Uh, Fallen Earth? Okay. Nightmare individuals. Briefly mentioned in chapter 7. Now, these chapters that he's mentioning, I don't know if that is included in that document, um, pasted in the description. The divergence of um, in the fall, divergence in the fall of a virtual civilization. Um, so I'm not sure what chapters he's referring to. He's written several books, so I don't know. And also, this is pretty dense material, you know. The academic writer or a schizophrenic, one of the two. So, Polish aristocrat Alfred Korzybski had the same ambition and announced the lofty goals of general semantics in books with titles as bombastic as Marino's Manhood of Humanity in 1921 and Science and Sanity in 1933. I laugh because he says bombastic titles. Um, when the title of this little subsection is Nightmare Intellectuals. For this chapter, we shall revive the thinking of three other Europeans who wrote about the fall of civilization: Oswald Spengler, Batiram Sorokin, who, like Marino and Korzybski, reacted to the First World War, and Edward Gibbon, who took a somewhat longer perspective. Spengler is usually dismissed today or not even remembered, in part because top Nazi leaders drew upon his theory, but also because both his pessimism and the huge scope of his ideas failed to harmonize with the narrow but fundamentally optimistic teachings of living social scientists. His most influential work was titled The Decline of the West and predicted the imminent fall of European civilization. Not exactly a unique idea in the great wake of war. Indeed, his conceptualization was a form of idealism, arguing that every great culture is based upon and derives its energy from a single great idea. In the case of the West, it was boundless space. And science fiction fans might be interested to know that Spengler actually did associate this concept with astronomy, while more mundanely it captured the age of discovery, in which for the first time the world became something approximating a unit through European exploration and near dominance. I did not know that about Spengler. I mean, I have I will tell you how I got this document. I already said it. I got it from the person who wrote it, who was playing a new character named Ayn Rand, and I communicated with via in-game mail. I received a document, and um, uh, I think he wanted a sort of a, hey, what you think about what I wrote? I am still digesting this shit because he's going to be talking about fallen Earth, and boy, is he ramping it up, something crazy, you know. Okay, so and probably for a good reason. Probably for a good reason. The Nazis may have naively conflated boundless space with Lebensraum, the much more constricted idea that Germany needed more territory. One would not ordinarily associate Nazism with optimism, yet Spengler did not believe that military aggression could long delay the death of Western civilization, because all civilizations die once their key ideas are exhausted. Spengler's pages in both the English and German versions of Wikipedia note that, in fact, Spengler and the Nazis did not see eye to eye, and he was not a racist. Some modern conservatives mirror Spengler's thinking, notably James Burnham in the 1964 book Suicide of the West, but they are not widely discussed in academic social science. The most prominent contemporary scholar in Spengler's tradition is Patrick J. Buchanan. Pat Buchanan, who has written books with similar titles, The Death of the West and The Suicide of a Superpower. But one senses that Buchanan believes Western civilization might possibly survive if it returns to what he believes are its Christian roots. Hmm. All right. I mean, I'm not surprised. Pat Buchanan being Christian. Are you? Spengler had experienced the disaster of the First World War from the German side, and Sorokin had experienced it from the Russian side. He barely survived imprisonment by the Bolsheviks, having served in the interim government they overthrew, and like Marino and Korzybski, immigrated to the United States, where he founded the sociology department at Harvard University. He agreed that civilizations are formed around a set of ideas, and that these ideas could decay in purity and effectiveness over time, but he held out hope that after a fall, a civilization could rise again. He was critical of Spengler's particular formulation, and he believed he had developed rigorous empirical methods for charting a culture's rise and fall. Yet today's sociologists practically never mention him. At Harvard, he dismissed the formulations of an upstart named Talcott Parsons, whose ideas were more ornate than Sorokin's, but not in contradiction of them, except in the minor detail that Parsons believed in the possibility of unending progress. Parsons will play a supportive role in the next and final chapter of this book. Next paragraph. I began my research in Fallen Earth before deciding to base my avatars on great thinkers from the real world. So, for the purposes of this chapter 1, I will rename my main character Gibbon, expert on decline and fall. We remember Edward Gibbon as an 18th century historian, but his huge masterwork actually does include theory and some very modern thinking. The original Gibbon belonged to the Enlightenment, and unlike St. Augustine, was thoroughly secular. The first of his virtues was willingness to work exceedingly hard, and his multi volume work has immense scope. Many writers would have concluded the project with the fall of the city of Rome, but the empire had earlier divided into a Latin western half, ending in the year 476, and a Greek eastern half based Byzantium that lasted nearly a millennium longer. Gibbon wrote about the entire decline and fall in both West and East, but paused after the fall of the city to offer a concise analysis, as well as a peppering, as well as peppering his narrative with disparate hypotheses. The fundamental cause of Rome's fall was that its greatness was immoderate, requiring usual commitment by the citizens, whose fervor and commitment decayed over the centuries. This sounds rather like the arguments of Spengler and Sorokin, that great civilizations are created in a remarkable process of social and cultural consolidation that will ultimately decay. Gibbon disagreed with those of his own century who said the division of the empire into two halves was at fault, saying that the foundation of Constantinople preserved the East but did not weaken the West. He noted that for a long time the Romans did not understand their changing world, the prime example being the rising strength of barbarians. Perhaps Gibbon's most hotly debated argument was that Christianity contributed to the growing national weakness that led to the fall of Rome. Even as it is moderated, the ferocity, oh, even as it moderated the ferocity of conquering barbarians. I wonder how. Can you take a barbarian and turn him into a Christian? I bet you they tried. I have nothing against Christianity. I'm quite accepting of all beliefs. As long as they're not hurting anyone. Don't hurt anybody, emotionally or physically. Or psychologically, you know? All right, so that's a tall order, I know. My original avatar in Fallen Earth, which here we name Gibbon, worked long and hard in several stages, reaching the maximum level of 55 experience. Oh, I have an idea. I know where this is going to go, and it sounds super painful. Deciding I needed both a broader intellectual basis and a reconsideration of the introductory levels, I ran avatars named Spengler and Sorokin up to level 20. Although their tours of duty were later in time, given the nature of their assignments, it makes sense to begin with them. War and Peace. The fundamental theme of my research on Fallen Earth was the variety of ways this virtual world suggested human society could be rebuilt on the ruins of a fallen civilization. That meant that one major set of tasks would require documenting and competing ideologies of many of the widespread factions and local communities. There's so many communities that have existed in Fallen Earth over the years. I don't think I've seen it in any other games quite the same way. And there are a lot of, well, there's a few other games that have had long-standing. This is just I'm going off script here, but there's a few other MMOs that have had long-standing communities that have sort of uh, come and go and reformed and reconfigured, or the communities that have a solid foundation and still have a presence in those games years after maybe their foundational or their founding members have been uh, gone for whatever reason. It's interesting. So, uh, continuing, but another would be comparing the different ways an individual avatar could progress economically, in skills, and in level of experience. Having explored many alternatives with Gibbon, the two other avatars would specialize, almost like two comparison groups in an experiment. Both Spengler and Sorkin considered humanity to be a naturally violent species, but Sorkin was more optimistic. So I decided that after the initial in game tutorial, he would never kill a human or humanoid NPC, while Spengler would have no compunctions against murder if he could gain from it. To complete the contrast, Spengler refused to gather resources from the natural environment or manufacture anything, while Sorkin would gather and craft constantly. Which strategy would be more successful? This guy is RP in Philosophers in FE. Each avatar's reincarnation took place in a pathological future that stressed his courage and his intellect to the breaking point. At the very beginning of their time in Fallen Earth, Sorkin, Spengler, and Gibbon must have died. Each reawakens to find himself inside a facility at Hoover Dam, which he must escape by battling enemies led by Alec Masters and cooperating with the enemies of the enemies. His memories are hazy, but the facts are these. His body is a clone of the original, into which his mind was copied from a computer database at a LifeNet pod, of which there are many across the landscape. But he dies again and is resurrected 4 years later, viewing a promotional video for the LifeNet system. Welcome to LifeNet, a product of Global Tech. If you're seeing this, you are dead. But don't worry, with LifeNet, death is just a minor setback. You may be feeling confused, disoriented, or even a little scared. It's understandable. You just had your vigorous, happy life interrupted by explosion. Please accept our condolences. But no more dwelling on the past. Right now, LifeNet is reconstructing your body, thanks to our patented... The magic of rebirth happens inside LifeNet's patented regeneration pods. These are interruptions in the text here. And your perfectly cloned body comes out. You've also been fitted with a wireless neural scanner providing dynamic syncing between your brain and the LifeNet database. Your memories will be... But wait, there's more. Fucking Global Tech. The interruptions led to one of the story-based quest arcs concerning the evil plans of the leader of Global Tech that threatened the LifeNet system, as well as the weak grip on life held by local residents. But the crucial aspect of this fragmentary video was the information it conveyed about the LifeNet system. Each clone wears a radio collar that transmits his recent experiences into the LifeNet database. Whenever he or she is killed, which happens often, he is he or she, he or she. I'm going to say he. It's easy. He is regenerated to the nearest LifeNet facility, which are half-wrecked underground outposts, as the data from his experiences are combined with his cloning template to bring him back to life. Also, some of the LifeNet facilities are set so that visiting one allows one to regenerate there intentionally from one of the others to reduce travel time across the huge landscape, but at the cost of some chips, the poker chips looted from casinos that have become the post-apocalyptic currency in the Grand Canyon region. After revival, an avatar may select where to enter the world at one or another of various starter towns, all in the southern plateau region of this virtual world. Sorokane began at Midway, Spengler at Boneclaw, and Gibbon at Clinton Farm, which stands for Fire, Alpine, Rescue, and Medical. The Fallen Earth Wiki provides a near sociological analysis of each. Midway is a pistol rifle starter town with a focus on crafting missions. Before the fall, Midway was a high class neighborhood. Nowadays, it is considered a manufacturing town where most of its supplies go through to trade hubs such as Odenville, although nominally a town under the protectorate of the Chota. Control of the town is left to two traveler families, the Burnses and the Kellers, fighting for dominance of the rundown town. Built in an abandoned rock quarry, the Chota have made Boneclaw their last defense against attacking Blade Dancer raiders while fighting off mutant insects and monsters from below. Once a prosperous mining town for the Chota, it was bombed by Alec Masters and was only recently resettled. The town is led by Strongarm, the war chief of the Slaughter Kings, and he's having trouble keeping Boneclaw together as remnants of old Boneclaw still cling to old bonds. The old residents of Boneclaw, led by a woman named Chernobyl, are sowing seeds of dissent from the kings from Fracture, of which Strongarm is a part of. Meanwhile, some are skeptical and afraid of being posted so near the edge of the inhabitable zone of the plateau, and with the recent death of the shaman, the town's future seems bleak. Just a little note on that, Boneclaw and Embry, before they got bombed, I thought they were very well done cities. What a shame to blow them all up. I'm not the only one that feels that way. I know. I may be one of a few, but I know that I'm not the only one. All right, next. Built out of an old training station for fire and rescue response, Clinton Farm is under siege from Blade Dancer raiders who are excavating deadly toxins from the mine beneath the town. Before the fall, Clinton Farm was where they trained people to be rangers, EMTs, and other kinds of service officers. The town is governed by a family who changed their names to Clinton and has been living in the farm since the fall. The farm acts as an academy and continues to train cadets, rangers, and doctors up to this day thanks to the Clinton family. Many of the factions are composed entirely of non-player characters, some like the Blade Dancers, destined to be enemies, and others like the Clinton family, capable of befriending the Avatar. 6 factions are composed of players, as well as non-player characters. the Chota and the Travelers being two of them. Fallen Earth had the most complex player faction system of any MMO I have studied. Even the changing even changing the system of relationships between the factions during the period of my research, it was highly ideological, thus helping us understand how some of the best game worlds can be not only great works of art, but intellectual documents. Nightmare intellectuals. The territory is divided into three main sectors, plus some other advanced zones, with each with its own features and missions, arranged so that avatars could gradually work their way up the 55 levels of experience and explore everything and everywhere. The word gradually is an understatement because progress is slow, perhaps the slowest of any major MMO. There are three ways of looking at that low velocity of progress, all of them favorable to the game. First of all, an avatar is not limited to any particular class of character and could at any time switch his style of play, which meant there was no need to have multiple avatars to gain different experiences, investing a lot of time across several of them. Second, although the story based missions were not especially abundant, there were so many other interesting things to do that rushing through the sectors was not wise. Third, the difficulty of ascending all the way through Fallen Earth was a reflection of real life. And despite its fantasy elements, this virtual world was among the most realistic. Fallen Earth is sometimes described as a sandbox game with the effect that one could progress without completing missions assigned by NPCs. Thus, while completing a quest confers experience points, so does killing an enemy or crafting a weapon. Among the most important ladders of status, somewhat separate from experience, is reputation, one's standing with a faction. Positive status allows one to accept more missions from NPCs who are fellow members to avoid being attacked by its members, to enter a town belonging to that faction, and to trade with its businesses. Taking both non-violent Sorokine and violent Spengler up to experience level 20 allowed them to explore far into the second sector, where membership in one of the 6-player factions was possible, and thus to complete an experiment about the extent to which killing enemies was required to earn faction reputations. Table 10.1 shows how many reputation points the two earned with 9 factions in each of the 2 sectors. Okay, so there's a table here. And this table has Sorokin and Spengler. Sorokin being the non-violent one and Spengler being the violent one. In Sector 1, Sorokin has 1,000 townsperson faction, 300 banker faction, no Franklin's Rider faction because you got to kill people, and then no faction from Vista, Chota, Library, Traveler, Forcer, Tech. In Sector 1, Spengler had 1,075 townspersons faction, 1,800 bankers faction, 6,230 Franklin's Rider faction, which puts him about 8,000 points ahead of Sorokine. In Sector 2, Sorokine made 0 faction with townspeople, bankers, or Franklin's Riders, and went positive 33k with Vista, 11k with Chota, and 7k with Light Bearers. Negative 15k for Travelers, negative 23k Enforcer negative 66k with tech for sum of positive 52k. Spengler gained 79 townspersons faction, 0 bankers, and 550 Franklin's riders. Went negative 76k with Vista, negative 38k with Chota, negative 50k with Light Bearers, positive 25k with Traveler, positive 19k with Enforcers, and positive 38k with Tech. Oh, a total of 83k faction points. All right. Interesting. Townspersons are not an organized faction, but simply NPCs who lived in or near a town and wanted help, whether killing enemies or gathering natural resources. In Sector 1, the plateau, both researchers gained 1,000 townperson reputation points, but Spengler gained 75 more. Bankers actually can be found in banks and offer delivery missions as well as killing missions. With them, Spengler earned 6 times as many reputation points as Sorokin did, who refused to kill. Franklin's riders are like the Pony Express of the Old Wild West, but their missions require combat rather than mere mail delivery. When they left the first sector, Spengler had far more total reputation points than Sorokin, 9,105 compared to 1,300. In Sector 2, Northfields is where an avatar may join any of the 6 player factions. By doing so by completing missions for its NPCs and making its town the home base. We shall discuss the ideologies of these factions later, but each is the mortal enemy of another, such that earning 1 positive reputation point with one earns 2 negative points with its foe. As part of the wider experiment, I had Sorokin and Spengler affiliate with different factions, but the magnitudes of their reputations would have been about the same if they had chosen different specific affiliations. As the comparison of positive points clearly shows, both avatars were able to gain substantial reputations, but Spengler's was much higher. Another way of thinking about the difference is to realize that Sorokin gained many experience points gathering resources and crafting them into products, something that Spengler refused to do. So both could reach level 20 without having identical faction reputations. Sorokin's total negative reputation is exactly twice his positive, just as we would expect. Twice Spengler's positive reputation of 83,518 would be 167,036, somewhat higher than his actual negative total of 165,790, which suggests that occasionally he killed the wrong NPC. Oops. The ratio of positive reputations, Sorokin and Spengler, is about 0.14 in Sector 1, but 0.63 in Sector 2, which suggests that the reputational disadvantage of nonviolence is less with respect to player factions than non-player factions. Having a rough grasp of the mechanics of faction reputations, we can now move to the more interesting topic of faction ideologies.